Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this year's Careers Live. Now, whilst this is the first time we've been online for Careers Live, this is actually, I think, the sixth time we've had the pleasure of presenting our Careers Showcase to schools and colleges and those working in education across, well, a very wide North of England region now. Whilst many of us have not been in the office much, perhaps this last year, an awful lot has been going on. We are pleased to have some very eminent speakers here today to present to you on skills for jobs, lifelong learning for opportunity and growth as our theme this year, the government's white paper. Opportunity being the theme of this year's conference is also very important, as Aspire iGen has chosen this point to seize the day and actually become known as the Opportunity Centre. All of our training centres and career centres have been called Opportunity Centres for a number of years, and we think it's the time now to go green. We've got a new green logo and to become known as the Opportunity Centre. So please hold on to that, the Opportunity Centre, part of the Aspire iGen group, when you think of coming to Careers Live in future. We want careers, education and guidance to be embedded in the life of every school and college. That's deep in the document on page 47, and so do we. Without further ado, I'm going to ask the first of our speakers, Professor Tristram Hooley, to talk to you about Where Next for Careers Guidance in England. He will be followed by Nicola, who's Director of Education at the Careers and Enterprise Company, who's going to talk to you about the context of careers. And finally, Kieran, who is Executive Director of Careers England, a professional with 30 years of experience in our industry, who will talk about how careers advice and guidance support opportunities for young people. We've then got a panel discussion and we hope to finish about 3 o'clock. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Tristan and let's get going. Professor Hooley, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. So I've just shared my slides. Can people see that okay? Does that seem like it's working? Yes, we're getting some nods there. Great. Okay, super. Well, I don't know how many careers lives I've done, but I reckon it must be probably 4. Maybe this is my 4th. Maybe it's my 5th actually. So I didn't realise I'd done almost all of them, I think. So and obviously this year is very different from previous years as we're doing it online. But we're going to try and keep it a bit interactive. So if you've got questions as we speak, we're going to try and pick those questions up. So if you put them in the Q&A, and I'll try and pick those up. And I will then also, I'll probably take a few after each presentation, and then we'll hopefully move into a kind of a bigger debate, because we're all kind of talking about similar subjects, which is really where are we now, what are some of the opportunities, what are some of the difficulties. So hopefully that sounds all right to people, and we'll be able to kind of crack on really. So I've called this From Wuhan to the White Paper because I think that it's been a very strange year indeed, and it would seem kind of ridiculous to talk about some kind of new bit of public policy without thinking also about what's been happening in the wider world. So I'm probably going to focus more on the wider world and less on the details of what the government did, last week. But I know that the other 2 presenters are going to dive into a bit more of the details of that. I guess Kieran will probably come at it from a slightly more critical point of view of what he thinks the government should be doing. And Nicola will hopefully tell you about some of the ways that careers and enterprise are responding to this and some of the opportunities that are coming out of it. So we think that career is the kind of central concept that we work with. But what is career when we're thinking about career? Well, career, as far as I'm concerned, is our journey through life, learning and work. It's not just about our paid work. It's about the way in which all the aspects of our life kind of join together. And so we've got an example here from, I think this is a street in Leeds, where they've really come together in the pandemic and created this kind of community of people supporting each other, even in a sort of socially distanced way. And I suppose what I want to try and do when I'm talking about career is to bring into focus, as well as the paid work aspect, also these aspects of community, of family, of your hobbies and pastimes, and of your role as a citizen. And I think this is important, particularly at the moment, because we've seen through the pandemic the way in which our working life has been blended in to our family life, the way in which education has been kind of blended, brought back into the home. We've seen, you know, the relationship between politics and career really come together. Those distinctions where we have sort of work in one world and politics in another, I think have really dissolved over the last year. So this is when we're talking about career, we're talking about career in a big sense. And I think this is why it's so important to be a focus of the education system. So careers, because in our careers, we're trying to make our lives and the lives of those around us better. And we're trying to exert control, of course, within limits. We can't do absolutely anything we want over the direction that our careers progress. And career is powerful because it's life-wide and it's lifelong. So if I think about how I spend my time, I have the decision every day, you know, am I going to knock off work early? I used to be able to, you know, think, oh, maybe I'll go for a drink, but obviously we can't do that anymore. So maybe I'll knock off early, go for a walk around the garden. Or should I stay at work late and not speak to my children this evening because I'm trying to get some work done? Now that's a career choice. That day-to-day sort of choice is a career choice. But why career is such a powerful concept is it joins together those day-to-day choices we make about whether we should finish our homework or work late at the office or whatever it might be. It joins those with the lifelong decisions that we make. So career is about how we think about what we do today, but also how that relates to what's going to happen to us in the future. So maybe I don't help with my children today, don't talk to my children today, but I do that because that's going to help me to get a better job and will give me a better standard of living and the whole family a better standard of living in the long run. So I'm making these trade-offs all the time, and career is about these trade-offs between how we spend our time in the day-to-day and how we spend our time across the life course. So career links education with life. It links our effort today with our outcomes tomorrow. It links schooling with society. And for all of the teachers in the audience, it hopefully gives us an answer to that question that you often will get from a particularly kind of clever dick student at the back of the class saying, well, why are we learning this? What use is it going to be? And career gives us the answers to those questions if we use it kind of well and cleverly. So where does career happen? And I suppose there are sort of two traditions within careers research. One is it focuses on career as a psychological act, something that happens in our mind, our thinking, and so on. And the other is focus on career as it happens in the world. What is our society like? What's the opportunity structure? What's going on in the labour market, and so on. Now, of course, both of these traditions are true, and both of them have something to bring to bear. Our careers do happen in the world, of course they do, but we have choices about how we respond to that, how we think that through. And what I'm going to argue today is that over the last year, both of those things have been fundamentally disrupted. So in this rather terrifying image that I'm sharing with you now, you know, the world has felt like often it's been on kind of fire over the last year. So, you know, that has meant that lots of the assumptions we have about how career works and how career operates have kind of fallen apart and become more difficult to work with. And so we have to do some really fundamental rethinking about how we talk about career, how we work with career. So what does all this mean for our careers? Well, one of the things it clearly means is that the linear hierarchical pathway of a career as being sort of join an organisation, wear a suit, step up through the career ladder, that's probably not a very helpful way to think about it. I'd argue that's never been a very helpful way to think about it, but the COVID crisis has really reminded us of that. Oh, sorry, I've dropped my microphone. Let me try and see how we go here. There we are. Right. Okay. All right, back in the room, hopefully, here. So what I'm going to cover today is this. I'm going to talk a bit about COVID. I'm going to talk about how that's affected the labour market, about what I'm going to call psychosocial impacts of COVID, the government's response, and then where career guidance fits in. So hopefully this will set the scene for what we're going to talk about for the rest of the day. So COVID obviously came as a bit of a shock to most of us. You know, I remember probably about this time last year hearing about it, finding out about it, thinking, you know, or maybe I'll have to not go into work for a couple of weeks, that kind of thing. But, you know, the idea that something that happened over in the other side of the world, you know, that started in China could actually transform my life for a year, just I could not get my head around. And so it came as a big shock and a big surprise to all of us. And I think if we look at how it's gone over the last year, this is the worldwide number of new cases, so new cases per day. And what it shows us is that really, despite all of those false hopes and false kind of sense that things we're almost over, it's coming to an end, really what happened was up and into the beginning of 2021, the number of cases from COVID pretty much steadily grew. Not every day, but day on day, we had slightly more. And we reached the peak around the end of last year. And thankfully, it's starting to drop off now. Now, you know, we're going to talk a bit more about what that means, but you know, globally, there's a good sense now for us to feel that we might be coming to the end of this. Not necessarily that COVID is over, but that the crisis that we've had, it's not getting any worse, at least. So these are, I produced some statistics for the Institute of Student Employers, which is one of the places that I work. And we do a weekly COVID bulletin. So if you're interested in labour market information, then I'd really advise you to sign up for that. And one of the things I do is I just look at the number of cases, how many deaths and how many cases were there. And what this shows is that we've had a kind of, you know, we had a peak in January. This is really taking it through the end of last year. And I sort of started recording this when I thought it was all coming to an end, and then it all kicked up again. So I'm not complacent at all, but it does look like the cases are going down, but there's still a lot of COVID around. So it's still very much a present and ongoing crisis. But thankfully, we've now got the vaccine that makes us all kind of much more hopeful for the future. And we now see that around about a third of the UK population are actually vaccinated. So that's you know, incredibly good news, gives us a real sense that we're moving into a new phase. But everything that I've read on this tells me that the vaccine is going to support rather than replace existing public health measures like social distancing and so on, masks, that kind of thing. So the vaccine gives us a way forward, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go back to normal. And this idea of going back to normal is very important, I think, for how we think about this. And it's very important for the idea of career, because when we think about career, people have been making career decisions based on a set of assumptions about how things usually work. And for the last year, they've not been working in that way. And it's very possible that going forward, some of them may not work in that way ever again. So what have been the labour market impacts of this? So that's one of the things we're interested in as careers people. How's the labour market going? Well, this chart is from the International Labour Organization, and what it tells us is that people across the world have seen their working lives changed. Almost every country, almost every worker has seen some changes to their working lives. And this describes the proportion of the world's population who are experiencing some kind of change to their working life. And it's pretty much everyone, or at least at the end of the summer, it was pretty much everyone. If we then look at unemployment, what we can see is that unemployment has been trending up. And so this is in the UK, is the red line at the bottom. I've also given you figures for the European Union and the OECD countries, which is essentially a club of rich countries. What we see is that the pattern is kind of the same everywhere. We haven't got full data for the European Union here, but essentially, as a result of the crisis, the number of unemployed people have trended up. And why I've constructed this chart in the way I have is that it's worth looking back to the last crisis. So if we look back to 2008, we can see that the unemployment did trend up during the crisis, but it actually kept going, it kept trending upwards through till about, in the UK, about 2012. In many countries it was about 2014. So my sense is that while some of the public health issues might be coming to an end, the labour market issues that we're experiencing in this particular crisis are quite far from an end, really. And we may well see them get considerably worse before they get better. The impact of a crisis is not always immediate, and I think it's important for us to remember that. You know, obviously the government have tried to be very optimistic, and they're always telling us that it's almost over. But I think we need to remember that there are different features of this crisis, some of which are related to the immediacy of COVID, and some of which are somewhat, you know, we may experience in other ways. Unemployment, of course, is not the whole story. Unemployment is not what careers is about. You know, it's important, obviously, that we try and avoid unemployment, but COVID is not just changing our likelihood of being employed, although it clearly is doing that, but it's also shifting the way in which work operates. So we're seeing some forms of work disappearing and others being born. The number of people, for example, involved in the track and trace was something that we could never have predicted a year ago. The composition of work, of different jobs, is changing. I work in a very different way now than I did a year ago. Our working patterns are shifting. Work and life are being rebalanced in different ways, sometimes in ways people like, other times not so. Transitions, particularly from education into the workforce, are becoming more difficult. And many people, I think, are going to have to make career shifts, as some of the changes that we've seen in the economy are likely to become more structural and long term. So it's not just me saying this. I mean, you can read the Office for Budgetary Responsibility report that came out yesterday, I think, or the day before, which said, which actually was very optimistic, but still said we've got at least a year or 18 months of recession still to go. And that was a much more optimistic picture than the previous report that they put out. But Geeta Gopinath, who's from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, whose job it is to kind of worry about the global economy, she talks about what she calls the long ascent, that the changes that are wrought by the pandemic on the labour market are not going to disappear overnight. It's going to take us as a society a long while to get out of that. So that then leads us into what I would call psychosocial impacts. So, you know, if I think about myself, my life is really different. I've lost lots of the things that I used to love, the ability to travel, socialise, go to the gym or the pub, sometimes both in the same night. These were all things that were possible for me. Now I get to wear a mask, check my temperature sometimes. This is the view that I can see right at the moment, is out of my window. We've got a brick wall, the drain pipe opposite it. That's my view. It's rather different from, you know, travelling around the country, commuting into London and so on. I put a plant there to try and cheer myself up. But so my working life is very different. I've lost a lot of human contact. I'm spending all my time on Zoom and so on. And this is, you know, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm someone who has continued working. I've not experienced those labour market impacts that I've just talked about, but it has made a difference to the way I think about work and the way I think about my career. And I'm not alone. Our lives have been transformed in many ways. We have, you know, we're now dealing with all of our meetings on Zoom. We're seeing shops that we perhaps used regularly closed. You know, we still can't go out and go shopping, whatever. And this has led to a complex shift in our social connections. So on one hand, we're isolated. You know, we don't have this social contact that we were used to. But on another level, we become really clear that there is a relationship between ourselves and other people. You know, other people can pass on disease to us, but they also can help us to get better. We've become aware of the idea that the NHS has a capacity, and if too many of us get ill at the same time, then it reduces our chance of getting well. So we've become more aware of our social connections. We've recognised that we're increasingly fragile and vulnerable. I think, you know, a lot of us probably, when we've had to reflect on our own health on what the situation will be if we become unhealthy. What happens if someone dies? What happens if someone gets ill? These are things which we've all had to think about, and which ultimately shift the way we think about our careers. And this is something that we need to be talking about when we're talking about with young people and with older people about their careers. And ultimately, all of this stuff has changed what people think is important to them. It's changed people's values. It's changed people's sense of what matters. Now, I don't want to overstate that. I'm not saying that, just because we all clapped for the NHS, therefore we're all become wonderful altruistic people who don't care about money anymore. I don't think that's true at all. But certainly it has given people a chance to think about what they value in their working life, to think about what they value in their family life, to consider whether they like it or not, whether they like some of these changes or not. And this comes back to this idea that I've already touched on of this new normal. What is the new normal that people are defining for themselves and that we're deciding together as a society? So in an article that I wrote with my colleagues Ronald Sultana and Rhea Thompson, we talked about this idea of lockdown as being a pedagogic moment. It's a moment when we can think about what we want from life, and our role as careers professionals is to help people to think about this. And I think that also this moment that we're now moving into of reconstruction and our re-emergence from lockdown is also a pedagogic moment. It's also a moment when people will be thinking, what is it they want from their life? Where do they want their career to take them? But of course, hope can be a dangerous thing. We need to help people to believe that a better life is possible. That's what careers work is about. We need to help them to see that they might have a role in bringing it about. This is the kind of principal message that we preach as careers people, that you can have an impact on your life if you make the right choices, if you choose the right courses, if you find a job that you love. But we also need to prepare people for setbacks and help make people resilient, because we are merging into a difficult climate, a challenging climate, and careers work has got this job of trying to do both these things, both foster hope and optimism, but also build resilience at the same time. So what's the government done about this? Well, of course, we had the furlough scheme, which we've now been told has been extended to September. That's been very important. It's been a huge intervention by government into the operation of the labour market and into the working lives and careers of ordinary people across the country. It was a intervention that the government would have told you was impossible a year ago, but has proved to be, become part of this new normal. Rishi Sunak released his plan for jobs back in the summer, and there was lots of elements to that, which was about trying to stimulate employment. One of the ones that we were most interested in was £32 million for careers and the National Careers Service. Now, that was great to see. There've been quite a lot of problems in the way that that's been implemented, which we might talk about later. But one of the things that's worth noting is none of that money was really going anywhere near schools. And I think most people here are schools focused. And that's, to me, is a bit worrying. I would like to see careers in schools invested in as well. We've seen new schemes like the Kickstart scheme, which was an employment creation scheme. Again, in the budget yesterday, sadly, the Chancellor decided not to extend this, which seems to me a missed opportunity. And we then have had the Skills for Jobs, the white paper that came out setting out what the FE landscape, what the skills landscape should look like going into the future. I wrote a briefing of that for the Career Development Institute. I'm not going to go into it in details, but suffice to say, I was a bit underwhelmed by the opportunities that were offered in the white paper, which is not to say there aren't some good things. There are some really great things in it, and I'm sure we're going to hear about some of those today. But I think given the scale of the challenge that we've got at the moment, I would have liked to see a bit more coming out of government. Now, from a very reputable source here, from The Sun, I have extracted a summary of the budget, which I'm not going to go through in great detail. But I think what we can say as a summary of how the budget has gone, firstly, is there was very little in there for education. There was very little in there for career guidance. There was an extension of furlough, but most of the things that the way the government is trying to play this is to extend the period in which we're in crisis, but to believe that we're going to go back to the way things were before from now, we're saying September. I'm not sure that that's the way it's going to play out, but this is, I think, what Rishi Sunak is trying to achieve. OK, we need a bit more support for now, but by the time we get to September, we're back to the way things were. You can go back to how things were. That's kind of what we're being promised at the moment. Where does career guidance fit into this? Well, just to remind people, when I'm talking about career guidance, I'm talking about it in a broad sense, which is about all sorts of different ways that we can support individuals and groups to discover more about work, leisure and learning, consider their place in the world and plan for their future. So that's one-to-one career guidance. Of course, that's very important. Also careers education, also education employer brokerage, all sorts of forms of career learning that people might do. And what I would argue is that career guidance has to be a part of the reconstruction strategies post the crisis, and I would argue that we need much more to be done on these reconstruction strategies. But career guidance is particularly critical because it's about helping people to think about how they relate to all the structures that are there. Maybe the opportunities in the labour market have changed. Maybe there are new courses brought about by the white paper. How are individuals going to figure out what's the right thing for them? Well, they need to access career guidance. They need some space to think this through. And if we're going to make the most of the investments that we do in infrastructure, we need to be able to give people support in thinking that through. And I was involved in a survey that was led by Cedefop, so it's a European agency that looks at vocational learning, and they looked at career guidance in the pandemic, and they found that many countries were investing in career guidance, and indeed the UK is one of them. There have been a rapid adoption of new technologies in order to make this work, so career guidance has had to become more flexible, it's had to become able to be delivered in a variety of different ways. But there has been an increased demand for career guidance, even if sometimes it's been difficult to meet it. And there's a strong belief amongst policymakers and practitioners that career guidance can help to support this post-pandemic recovery. Now, I would argue that we need to be arguing for those things as part of our professionalism. You know, we need to be writing to our MPs, we need to be raising this in whatever forums we can and saying how important career guidance is, because it is such a critical part of the education system and of the national recovery post-COVID. But of course, career guidance can't do everything. It's an important part of a wider strategy. We need work creation schemes like Kickstart, we need investment in infrastructure, we need lots of different things. But what do we think career guidance is going to look like in the future? And this is where I'll finish. So I think what we've learned from the pandemic is that we're always career learning. We're always in a shifting context, but people always need to be learning about their career. In order to do that, they need help and support from career guidance professionals, and increasingly those career guidance professionals need to be competent to be able to deliver that through digital and integrated guidance. I think the other thing that we've learned is that some of the basic messages that career guidance offer might need to change. Some of the ways we talk about work, we talk about the workplace, we talk about the relationship between people's lives, their families, the wider environment. Some of these things are changed by the pandemic, and we need to think about, how much, for example, does it make sense to be talking about face-to-face networking in a situation where so much is going on online. And finally, I think career guidance has to engage with and help to shape the new normal rather than just passively respond to it. So we should be talking to people about what they think is normal, about how they want their lives to go in the future, but also about how they think the government, how they think the institutions they interact with, their employers, their learning providers and so on, should be responding to this as well. And I think we need to be helping people to think that through and talk about it. Some information about me, my blog, I'll put these slides up on my blog if you're interested, which is Adventures in Career Development. I'll also just highlight, we've got a website which we call the Career Guidance and Social Justice website, which talks about a lot of these ideas. It's got lots of different writers from across the world writing on it, and and it's well worth a look. So to finish up, I think COVID-19 poses some really big issues for our society and for people's careers. How we answer them will shape how the future unfolds. Careers is not secondary to the future, it is the driving force of the future. Individuals making career choices is the driving force of the future. Career guidance has got an important role to play, and we need to help governments to see this. We need to rethink how we deliver career guidance into the future, given some of the limitations that we've experienced this year. And ultimately, in career guidance, what we're doing is we're helping people to define the new normal for them and for our society. Thank you. I will finish there. I don't know whether we've had any questions and comments come in yet. Oh, we have got a couple. So if it's all right, I'll take a couple and then I will hand over to Joanna at that point. Yeah. So sorry, I'm handing over to Nicola, aren't I? It's Joanna, I don't want her to panic suddenly and think she's got to give a speech. Sorry. Right, so the first question that I've been sent is, do you think the impact of COVID on education means the employers of the future will be behind where employees of the future will be behind where they where they should be when they enter the labour market? And that's something that actually in that quote I shared from Geeta Gopinath, she highlighted this loss of human capital. And I think it's actually really important because so much of the discussion about education has been all about qualifications, and it's been how will we award someone a GCSE? You know, what system can we use to fairly award people a GCSE? And you know, and that's fine. And we need to do that and so on. But it's been rather worrying to me that no one's talked about, is there something that you actually learn in your GCSEs that it might be important to know? Even if we can still rank students, perhaps having a year out of school might have meant that people's literacy will be that much weaker, or their numeracy will be that much weaker. And that is very worrying. And that's why I think it's important the government's put some funding into catch up. I would like to see some I'd like to see more funding. I'd also like to see some funding specifically for careers catch up. So for the idea that many people have missed a year's careers education and they need to pick up on that. And then I'll take one more question, then I'll hand over to Nicola. So it says, can you comment on the use of the furlough scheme, which wasn't deployed back in 2008 for the banking crisis? I'm probably a bit outside of my area of expertise here, but I mean, my sense is that the response that we've taken so far with COVID has been a very different kind of response to the response that was taken in the last crisis. And I don't think this is the only reason, but I think one of the reasons is that the response that was taken in 2008, which was one of austerity and essentially of cutting back services, failed. It wasn't a successful approach. It's created increased inequality. It prolonged the crisis, many people would argue, and so on. Now, these things are things that economists might argue about. But to my sense, my thought is that the investment that people the governments have been making all around the world has been really very positive. It's been the right thing to do. It's been making sure that working people don't pay the price of something that was not their fault. So I think that's really important. And to me, the way forward with this is continued investment in the labour market through things, and career guidance is really at the centre of that. I'm going to hand over now to Nicola. So Nicola's the Director of Education at the Careers and Enterprise Company, which is a wonderful institution, which I'm sure many of you will already be familiar with, and which I was very happy to work for a number of years. And she's going to be talking a bit about some of the fallout from the white paper, about what Careers and Enterprise have got planned for the next few years, and where she thinks careers education is in the current world. So over to you, Nicola.
Thanks, Tristram. That's great, and that's teed me up perfectly. Thank you so much. So I'll just start my slideshow now as we start off this session, and I thought that I would just start for a couple of moments by introducing myself, because this is actually my first Careers Live engagement since I've been Director of Education at the Careers and Enterprise Company, which unbelievably I'm now heading towards 18 months into. And obviously a year of that 18 months has really been at home alongside everybody else that's been working from home throughout the course of the pandemic. When I speak to you all this afternoon, and in fact in any context when I speak very much from the perspective of an education leader. So just to give you a little bit of background, my journey in the careers environment has been a long one, 20 years or so, but very much from the perspective of an education leader as opposed to a careers guidance professional. So immediately prior to joining the CEC for the last 7 years before that, I was the head teacher of 2 schools in the north of England. The first of those was I was the founding head teacher of a studio school, and a school where the curriculum was absolutely steeped in careers and the development of futures of young people, and our curriculum was co-constructed with industry. We had 200 live employer relationships working with us at any given time during the course of the academic year, and careers was embedded at every level in every classroom across the school. But then following that, I was the head teacher of a mainstream 11 to 16 inclusive community school. We had 47% pupil premium cohort within that school, and our careers lens was very much one of improving life chances, tackling disadvantage, and really creating opportunities that absolutely mattered to making a difference for all of the young people within our cohorts at that particular school. So in both of those 2 schools, careers was absolutely placed at the heart of our school model, but for various different reasons and in various different formats across the 2 schools overall. And so when I came to the Careers and Enterprise Company, I did that because I saw an opportunity to be involved in the development of careers guidance for all young people at a more systemic level. So when I came out of school, actually, the question that I was most asked was, oh, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? What made you stop wanting to be a head teacher? And there was no such thing. It was purely an opportunity to take my career into a direction for a period of time that was absolutely steeped in the development of a world-class careers guidance offer for young people, and that's what drives me to do this role every day. I may one day choose to go back into frontline education. That is certainly something that remains high on my personal agenda for the future overall. So I stay very, very close to education. So since the introduction of the careers strategy in 2017, the role of the Careers and Enterprise Company has really been threefold. We have 3 clear objectives. The first of those objectives is to connect education and industry, and to give young people opportunities and schools opportunities to really work closely with industry leaders and to enable young people to be able to experience meaningful encounters of the workplace and of industry. And we know that secondary age students are now benefiting from more regular and more meaningful encounters than they ever have done before. The second part of our remit as a company is supporting careers leaders. And so I lead 2 teams within the Careers and Enterprise Company. The first is a team of education professionals, and their role is very much to support the professionalisation of careers leaders across the country, and to make sure that those careers leaders have got the tools and resources and training to be able to fulfil their roles to the best of their ability within their schools and colleges and special schools across the country. And then the third objective of the Careers and Enterprise Company is working to support schools and colleges with achieving the Gatsby benchmarks. So the Gatsby benchmarks, of course, being one collective framework, one language that all stakeholders that work within this careers guidance space are able to understand and work collectively together for. So we now know that through our enterprise advisor network, which extends across the country, we have around about 80% of state funded schools and colleges in England that are engaging with us and accessing Careers and Enterprise Company network supported activities. The network itself is supported by around about 3,600 voluntary enterprise advisors who also bring their industry expertise into the strategic planning and development of careers within schools and colleges. Around about 45% of schools in the country are currently involved in our careers hubs, and that is represented about 50% of colleges as well. And careers hubs are areas that have been piloted over the last year or so, and in order to offer a more place-based intensive support for schools and colleges in the careers guidance sector. And we know that where those hubs exist, accelerated progress is being made towards the Gatsby benchmarks, and we know that young people are getting a better deal in terms of their consolidated careers guidance opportunities. So I spoke about our remit with careers leaders. At the moment, we have around about 2,000 careers leaders who have either been trained or are currently being trained through fully funded, accredited professional development programmes. And those programmes are also accompanied by a bursary for their school and college on completion of the training programme overall. And we know that schools and colleges across the country then, generally speaking, tend to reinvest their bursary either in additional training for careers advisors to bring into their schools and colleges, or into careers activity to support their strategic careers programmes across their schools overall. Now, it's easy for me to talk about big numbers and statistics, but that's not what I'm here for. And whilst it's easy to talk about those numbers and statistics, what's really important for me to recognise and acknowledge is there is still huge amounts of work to do in this space. As far as I'm concerned, careers guidance is a job that will never be done, because we will always have the next cohort of young people coming through the system who need the best available support that they can possibly be given. And until we get to a state in education across England where careers as a concept is absolutely hardwired into our education system, and that every single young person that leaves education in this country, whatever the age and whatever their pathway, when they feel confident that they can make genuinely informed and independent choices, then we know that the job is done. So of course we are a very long way from that place. We must continue to work together to make the system stronger. And that's why, of course, the Careers and Enterprise Company are particularly interested in the careers section of the further education white paper that Tristram referred to, the skills for job paper. So this slide details key areas of interest for us. And most importantly, as a head teacher, this reinforces and builds on allowing schools, colleges and special schools to be able to continue the work that they've started as part of the career strategy overall. So of course, Tristram has alluded to, and I agree in some respects, that this career strategy maybe does not go far enough. But I think we can ask ourselves always the question, how far is far enough? The real impact of what exists within the National Career Strategy is really seen in the implementation, and that's seen at a level where it's reaching young people. So in education, we're very used to and very well versed in seeing a lack of investment in a budget. I mean, that's not a new thing in education at all. But the good thing about education, of course, is we are the creators of opportunity. So morally, across education, we are generally and should be driven by giving young people their game plan for the future. So there's a range of different opportunities for us when we consider implementation, when we look at the white paper, and when we look at the fact that at least there is a small, albeit small, chapter specifically around careers education within the white paper. And I think the implementation potential is threefold for me. The first thing overall is that we are able as a company to continue to build an infrastructure which supports all schools, all special schools and all colleges in England to be able to offer a world-class careers guidance programme. And it's very, very important that that's not a one-size-fits-all approach. no one-size-fits-all approach ever fits the education system, because as education professionals, in the context of our own environments, in the geographies that we work in terms of the cohorts that we work with, we really want to be able to take structures, resources and activities that exist and tailor them to be specifically useful to our own particular cohorts overall. The second piece of potential for me is to make sure that every young person has got access, and I mean genuinely inclusive access, to opportunities, encounters and expert guidance and information that enables them to make choices that are absolutely right for them. So not choices that are driven by funding, not choices that are relevant to performance tables, which are there for schools and colleges, and in fact not choices that are really linked to the achievement of the Gatsby benchmarks, because in the same way that performance tables are a measure for schools, then so are the Gatsby benchmarks. It's a framework that gives us a really consistent dialogue as professionals to work towards, to be able to develop programmes that are progressive, strategic and relevant to the young people that we work with in our individual institutions. And the third opportunity for potential for me is the one which is that of being able to in the future upskill the entire education workforce in relation to what pathways are available to young people overall. And this next thing that I'm going to say is really quite sad, and sad though it may be, I actually have a favourite paragraph in the white paper. And so my favourite paragraph in the white paper is paragraph 103, which is the proposal to build careers awareness into every level of a teacher's professional development, and to build careers awareness into education leadership overall. No one through the white paper is expecting teachers, subject teachers, to become careers advisors. Careers advisors are highly trained professionals. I'm speaking to the converted with this audience today. But those highly trained professionals who have a fundamental and critical piece, they are a fundamental and critical piece of a young person's individual careers guidance jigsaw. And that overall is why I'm going to move away from the white paper a little bit now and talk to you about why it's absolutely vital that every school and every college and every special school in the country operates as its own careers community. So careers in education, for me, careers guidance, careers programmes, careers education, whichever way we want to refer to the development of that. And really what we are referring to is the development of futures for young people and giving young people the eyes on their futures. Careers education is really rather like literacy in a school. So 10 years ago, literacy was regarded as the job of the English department. Just as now, careers is very often and widely regarded as the job of the careers leader in the school, who more often than not is also doing multiple other jobs within their school too. But really, careers, or indeed the narrative which sits behind careers, which ultimately is preparing young people for their futures, really that is the responsibility of everyone in every school and every college. Much in the same way as we treat safeguarding. It's the responsibility of us all. So Sir John Holman, who was the original author of the Gatsby framework and obviously works for the Gatsby Foundation, he has said many times that the careers leader is really the conductor of an orchestra. So for a careers offer in a school to be really successful, it must have a range of different features. So it must be a strategic, progressive programme of activity which delivers on a number of fronts for young people overall. And I think that for a strategic careers programme to really have impact, then it must be aligned to and embedded within whole school improvement priorities. So therefore, it must also be really well supported and prioritised by senior leadership teams in schools and colleges, but also by careers linked governors overall as well. And then everyone in the whole school careers community must understand the role that they have to play in that. So there's a few bullet points on this slide here, and they literally scratch the surface but they scratch the surface to show where each and every single member of a school team has a part to play in the development of a whole school careers community. Without this approach, and without everybody taking responsibility for the part that they play in the development of young people being able to visualise their futures, it's very, very difficult for a young person to be able to leave school and suggest that they've had a world-class careers guidance programme at their fingertips. And so I genuinely believe that it's really important for me as a school leader to always focus on the how that we do this overall. And so my team within the Careers and Enterprise Company exists to make sure that we support careers leaders with their roles overall. And we support careers leaders with enabling and developing their schools to be able to operate this type of whole careers community overall. And the careers community extends way beyond the classroom walls. It extends into all of the stakeholders that exist and work with those schools and colleges, and of course, not least with parents. We know that parents are heavy influencers when it comes to young people and the choices that they make when they leave school and college overall. So basically, my team across the course of the last year have been working really hard to work out how they can provide the right training, tools and resources to be able to enable careers leaders, but also education leaders, senior leadership teams and head teachers and principals and their governors to be able to undertake all of those features and develop those features within their schools to have the very best impact for young people. So I want to share with you a couple of examples of how that has been unfolding over the course of the pandemic, but also where that's going to go to in terms of future development overall. So through lockdowns 1 and 2, we responded to a series of asks which came from the education sector. And I think what's important now is that the education team have only been in existence at the CEC for a very short time in terms of their overall journey to where they are now. The first couple of years of the company overall was really about developing the place-based network structure to make those connections between education and industry. And now that we have a specialist education team as part of the central team at CEC, we're able to really connect with careers leaders in schools and colleges, but also then really ask them what they genuinely want in order to be supported appropriately. So across the course of the last year, we've created and we've staged and we've launched a whole range of different activities to be able to allow you in your schools and colleges to pick up resources and run with them. Now, all of these resources are open access, and when these slides are shared with you, the slides are linked to various resources that you can get to, because I really believe that it's important that if you are giving your time to listen to somebody like me, I give you something to take away from the session. So all of the resources are open access and they're all linked into this presentation overall. And I think in the chat, one of my colleagues from my team, Kelly, will be posting links and answering questions as we're going through this presentation overall as well, if there are any. So the most fundamentally important thing that we did was create a searchable resource directory, and that's searchable by key stages and also by Gatsby benchmarks, so that any teacher or any careers leader across the country can find resources that are useful to use within their classrooms overall. We don't create resources that are direct to student resources. All of our work is to facilitate the work of careers leaders. So we were also asked through lockdown 1 in particular to really support schools and colleges with keeping employer engagement alive through online provision through the first lockdown, when, let's face it, we were all floundering around with what was going to happen with all of our provision, let alone our careers provision. So we ran a week of activity during lockdown 1 last June, which was called My Week of Work. And we did that in partnership with the Oak National Academy and a company called Learn Live. And that was really a very quick, responsive opportunity to give Year 10s some access to some programmes that ordinarily had been taken away from them because they couldn't complete their work experience last year. And as we know now, that situation has gone on for much longer. And then we also responded to a request for some targeted inspiration support for year 11s and 13s who were making transition choices. So we started to develop and launch a series called Work It. And Work It is a series of short videos of young people who have already accessed the workplace, but in different forms. So they may have gone in through apprenticeship routes, university routes, through graduate schemes. There are young people with SEND represented. There are entrepreneurs represented, and they can be picked up and slotted into any home learning programme or any kind of careers programme in school, or indeed subject lessons to inspire young people. And then we created a set of transition resources for careers leaders called the My Choices programme. Now, every single one of these resources is live, and every single one of these resources is completely flexible in terms of how you use it in your school and college. They can be used for a full week, or they could be used for parts of lessons, or for an entire term's worth of provision. For example, for year 11s this year, when they have got gaps in their timetables because of no examinations taking place. So that's one consolidated and progressive suite of resources that we created last year. But we've moved much further forward, much faster through lockdown 3 and as we move forward. And more recently, we've been focusing very much on how we support schools with the development of their whole school careers community, and in particular, how do we support schools with the development of Benchmark 4 and embedding careers really effectively into curriculum subjects overall. So over the last few weeks, we've launched a suite of resources called My Learning, My Future, and there are 24 curriculum subject areas that have been covered with full sets of plug and play resources for teachers to use. And these include ready-made PowerPoint, slide sets for classroom teachers, homework activities, discussion topics, inspiration guides. There is literally something for every subject teacher across the school curriculum, particularly at Key Stage 3. And we know that many of those resources are being used right now during National Careers Week this week. So alongside that, though, it's very important that we continue to support careers leader professional development, and we do that through two different streams. We do it through formal and funded careers leader training, but we also do it through free webinars and masterclasses, which we operate to enable you to take part in kind of interactive discussion sessions so that you can share practice with colleagues from across the country and really tackle some of those difficult benchmark challenges that you're faced with on a day-to-day basis in your schools and colleges. And then finally, we spend an awful lot of our time reaching out to careers leaders and listening to what you have to say. So we've got different focus groups that run across different parts of education. So careers leaders, education leaders, and the further education and skills sector in particular, and of course the SEND sector. And we have dedicated and specialist resources continually being developed for the SEND sector as well. And these tend to be wrapped up then through a series of digital communications. So again, the links on these slides for you to access all of those resources and sign up to any of those support frameworks if you need to, are all embedded into this presentation overall. And so finally, as I move through to wrapping up my presentation this afternoon, I'd really just like to highlight that there are, of course, more resources and more support coming soon, and we continually work on a rolling programme of development of those resources. So the next set of resources that will be launched for you are very specifically to support young people with SEND. They will be available to use in mainstream settings and in school and college settings. And those resources will be called My Skills, My Future, and they will be coming to you very soon. And similarly, we're working very closely alongside a partner of ours called Youth Employment UK, who have been developing a direct to student set of programmes and tools called the Young Professional Programme, and you will be able to pick up and use those resources directly in your classrooms or virtually, of course, with all of your cohorts should you need to. So on this final slide, as I wrap up, there's a whole series of links and inboxes that you can contact us with if you are interested in finding out more about what we do, or if, of course, you've got very specific requests of us. And the other thing that we always like to do is encourage audiences to feedback to us. So if you've been using any of our resources, then don't hesitate to contact us to let us know what's good, or certainly, more importantly, what could be improved for the future moving forward, because we're very keen to keep moving and responding to your needs as we move forward. And I think that, you know, as we move forward over the next few months, and I use the we very collectively in terms of we as a company, we as the careers guidance professionals that are working across this landscape, as in everyone on this call today, and also we as in education professionals who are about to reintegrate young people en masse back into schools and colleges across the country. I think it's very important that we continue to work together. I think the future of careers education in the UK is a better future if we are really working tightly together. So from a national perspective, we have a role to share activity, resources and support with you, but then we take great care to localise that for you. So through our enterprise advisor network on a local level, then we are able to tailor your offers that are more relevant to you and the context that you're operating within. So if you're not part of the Enterprise Advisor Network, I urge you to get in touch as quickly as you can, but also to take part in those local network activities that will be really able to connect you up to local employers and really help you make sure that your programmes and your encounters are as fit for purpose as possible as we flex and move through the changing landscape going forward. So it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you this afternoon. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand back to Tristram, but of course I'm very happy to take any questions at all that anybody might have this afternoon.
Great, thank you. That was brilliant. There's a million questions that I'm not gonna try and do all of them. We've got a very so your team are doing a brilliant job at trying to field some of the more kind of where do I go for this type of questions. But so I'm going to try and pick out some of the big issues, and then hopefully we'll go to Kieran. We're having a few technical problems with Kieran, but we'll see how we get on with that in a second. But yeah, let's pick up a bit about the situation with careers education in schools. Actually, I'll just say to people, please keep the questions coming, and if you can, like the ones that you care about most, it will help me to decide what ones to focus on. And the one that seems to have attracted the most attention is one about work experience. And so I think there's a concern, I think, both, over a longer term, that work experience, since the requirement for work experience was removed, that the position of work experience in schools has been a bit shaky, with some schools doing it brilliantly and others kind of opting out. But obviously the last year has really hammered work experience, with many schools having no way of really delivering it, or really struggling to deliver it. Now, I know you guys have been doing some great stuff with virtual work experience, which I wonder whether you say a little bit about, but what would you advise to schools in terms of work experience? Okay,
so thanks, Tristram. I think work experience is one of the most fascinating aspects of what's happened across the course of the last year during the course of the pandemic. And I think that stems from right back to how we actually think about work experience at a school level. And so we've seen really probably two directions unfold across the country overall. Direction one are those schools and colleges who have got a very open-minded approach to work experience, and they don't actually think of work experience in that context anymore. They have really opened their minds and think about work, about experiences of the workplace, and how can you make that meaningful in different contexts overall. And then we have another half of the country who are really, really struggling and scratching their heads because they've been, for very many years, delivering a traditional 1 week or 2 week work experience programme that is successful in its format, and it's probably honed to run like a well-oiled engine in most of those schools and colleges, but incredibly difficult to flip to be responsive to the type of situation that we're dealing with at the moment. So there are a number of ways of looking at work experience overall. And I think that now is the time for you to really revisit what does your actual work experience programme look like in the context of your whole school offer, and also in the context of COVID and what we're faced with at the moment. And ask yourself some really tough questions around, actually, if the world went back tomorrow to exactly what it was like pre-pandemic, would we actually still want our work experience programmes to look the same? Because I know that if I went back to school this week, mine would look really different. Really different because of the opportunities that have opened up to us. Now, there will never be a substitute for some children for a really high quality face-to-face work placement. That doesn't necessarily need to be a 1 week block work placement, but that, you know, that face-to-face activity is really high quality. But just challenge yourselves as well. And I, hand on heart, can look back to some of the work experience programmes that I was responsible for signing off in my schools, where I think, do you know what? I don't think they were that meaningful. Children went out of school for a week, of course they did, but were those experiences always really linked to what that young person was interested in? Were they linked to a progressive careers programme that was incrementally building to a point where it led to work experience overall? Was it linked to my curriculum in any way? And were those work experiences linked to what's going on in our local economy and the skills needs of our local economy? And the answer to most of those questions is no. The answer to most of those questions is, how can we find 1 week places for 200 kids? So yeah, there's an awful lot to challenge yourself with in that perspective, and this is me talking as a school leader, not as a critical eye on what's going on in the country from work experience. It's kind of my own thought now going forward. But I think now what's happening is there are so many opportunities that are arising virtually that actually if you are really innovative about your approaches and you really engender the support of your SLTs to look at this in a different way, you can actually layer your meaningful encounters of the workplace all the way through every year of your cohorts, culminating in some really appropriate opportunities for young people that are bespoke to what they need and are interested in. Now, some of those might be virtual, some of those might be face-to-face, and there's likely to be a combination of the two. But just think of the possibilities that and some of the barriers that are removed by using some virtual work experience opportunities. So if you are, I'm based right in the north of England, if you are in rural Cumbria, it's really tricky to offer a face-to-face work experience programme to some young people from a geographical perspective. And at the same time, you may not be able to access placements in some sectors on a face-to-face basis. So a really great example of that would be midwifery, or many public sector careers that are on offer and available to us, or engineering or manufacturing, because it's just simply not appropriate to get young people into those environments for a week's work experience. So my advice at this stage around work experience is take a blank piece of paper, think really hard about what you want to achieve, think very hard about your individual cohort, and then start to layer together opportunities that might be available. Your network and your enterprise advisor should be able to help you with this, but also very importantly, during the week of March the 22nd, we will be running a campaign called Make It Work. And across the course of that week, there are different opportunities for you to get involved. So there will be a benchmark masterclass webinar for benchmark 6 in particular, where careers leaders can come together and plan and solve problems together and learn from what's happening in the very best examples. And also through the course of that week, there will be opportunities for you to log on to other events to hear from providers who are working in this space and have some fantastic offers to be able to take to schools and colleges.
Great, thank you. It's really helpful. I really very strongly endorse that. I think there's a lot of the ways in which work experience has traditionally been delivered have been like, people have assumed that's how some people should do it, the kind of 1 or 2 week placement. it was never actually required. It was never part of the you know, the work experience requirements, even back when it was part of the statutory guidance. And certainly it's not what Gatsby benchmarks say. So absolutely important to give young people access to the workplace, important to give them work experience. It's not, there's no right or wrong way to do that. There are a whole range of ways. Completely agree. Thank you so much. We'll come back to you. I've got some more questions for which I probably will push in Nicola's direction as we go towards the end, but we're going to now try and get Kieran Gordon to give his talk. Kieran's the Executive Director of Careers England, very much a leading expert on career guidance, really strong overview of policy and practice in the area. So I'll hand over to you, Kieran, to talk about how careers advice and guidance supports opportunities for young people.
Thank you, Tristram. I hope everybody can hear me. We've had some technical difficulties at this end. I'm not able to patch into the presenters as others have done. So you won't be able to see me, but I'm actually speaking through somebody's phone. So I'm hoping this can be heard by all the audience, and I'm sure Joe will let me know if there's any difficulties on that front. But I'll plough on. I can assure you the fact that you can't see me, you're up on the deal already. But a little bit about me. Kieran Gordon. I started as the Executive Director at Careers England in July last year. I was, prior to that, the Chief Executive of Career Connect, which operated across the northwest of England, careers guidance provider, retired, and then was offered a part-time role with Careers England. And the fact that I couldn't travel the world in my retirement for obvious reasons, Careers England seemed to be the next best bet. That's that situation. Careers England, just for those who don't know, we are a trade association, a trade body for careers providers across the nation of England, and we operate basically on a membership basis. And a lot of my work is in collaboration with many other partners, including Tristram, the Careers Enterprise Company, and many others, in terms of hopefully promoting and lobbying for and influencing positively the direction of government in terms of careers advice and guidance. So I'll say a little bit about what I aim to do in the time I have available. I won't take that long, I hope. I'll look at the case for careers education and guidance, careers advice and guidance. I'll consider the investment benefits in high quality career support systems for young people. I'll look at some of the latest policy initiatives, some of which Tristram has covered in terms of where careers advice and guidance feature. And I'll end with a few recommendations from my experience on where future careers policy at national level should tilt in the context of the pandemic. So if we could move to the next slide, please, Joe. Slide 2. Okay, I think we've got a difficulty there with moving on to slide 2. Can anybody from the panel here? That's okay. That's okay. Thank you.
You seem to be on the slide. I'd just go ahead and I think Joe will try and keep up.
Yeah. Okay, I think the format of the slides have changed. But anyway, I will plow on. So, in terms of how careers information advice and guidance makes a difference, well, apart from the obvious that it helps young people make informed decisions, there's a very rich seam of research that demonstrates there are many positive outcomes over and above career decision making, and those are there on the screen in front of you. So, careers information advice and guidance has led to improved levels of confidence, motivation, opportunity awareness, improved levels of attainment at school or college, improved levels of skills or learned new skills, increased satisfaction with choices made, and positivity about future prospects. Now, those bullet points there, they're drawn from comments directly from people who have been surveyed following their access to careers information, advice and guidance. And it's interesting to know also that the research that has been undertaken has found that most of the benefits, most of these benefits that are there before you, the incidence levels were higher where the young person had accessed advice and guidance in addition to careers information. So if we can move to the next slide, we should see soon a picture of our Chancellor, who we will have all watched last night. And this really harks back to July last year when Rishi Sunak stood at the dispatch box in the House of Commons and said, and I'll quote because it's not up there yet, the evidence says careers advice works, so we'll fund it with an additional 32 million to recruit careers advisors and provide bespoke advice and careers guidance for over 250,000 more people. Now, in my 40 years in the careers profession, it's the first time I've heard a front-bench spokesman of any government stand up and make such a positive statement about careers advice in terms of government policy. I'll come back to this a little bit later, because one of the big questions is this 32 million uplift making a difference? And there is a question about that. So moving to the next slide, the case here that I want to illustrate really is that yesterday we heard the Chancellor deliver his budget, very heavy on spending commitments, and whilst clearly careers advice and guidance is a cost to the nation when it's publicly funded, it is also, more importantly, I believe, an investment, and it must be viewed this way in terms of our national education and skills policy. Without a robust careers advice and guidance system, we could expect our supply side economy to perform less well than it does when it comes to people making their careers choices, their skills attainments, and of course productivity at a national level. The recent published study by the Careers Enterprise Company on the return on investments on personal guidance is how it's termed under the Gatsby benchmark 8, shows that the rate of return to the Exchequer for every pound spent or invested in careers advice and guidance was considerable. That for each pound, that there should be the government should be confident of recouping at least £3 and most likely much more. This particular report found that providing young people with 2 one-to-one personal guidance sessions by the age of 18 at a typical cost of £80 per young person, it's highly likely to be a net positive investment for the Exchequer. Now, I will say at this point there's further debate to be had about the assumed costs of careers guidance in the study, but I think that's probably for another time. So in terms of the impact, when you consider that 18-year-old NEET rates were around about 13 to 15% prior to COVID, and typical higher education dropout for non-mature students was around the 6 or 7%, there's clearly significant net positive benefits to the Exchequer by increased uptake of personal guidance and the impact it can make in people making more satisfactory and more sustainable decisions. And this is before we consider the wider societal benefits of things like lower levels of criminality, homelessness, benefit again, dependency, etc., that can result from worklessness for people. And for individuals, interestingly, the return was considered to be about a 9-time return, and that's based on the benefit to people in terms of lifetime earnings and levels of careers that they can aspire to and be promoted through. So the next slide, that's up there already. This is a more localised version, really. This was the company I previously was CEO of. We ran a New Horizons project, a social impact bond, which essentially meant that private investors gave us money to run bespoke programs for groups of young people, and the actual program itself was finally underwritten by the Department for Work and Pensions, i.e. They would pay the investors back for their investments, on the achievements of a series of outcomes. And you can see the outcomes on the left-hand tab in that particular table. It's probably important to say at this point that this particular project focused on 3 groups of young people who had special educational needs or disabilities, care leavers and young offenders. And the reason for that was DWP were very interested in looking at those furthest from the labour market. It's enabled Career Connect to work on a more intensive one-to-one basis with over 4,000 young people over a 3-year period. On average, young people accessed intensive support for a period of 12 to 13 weeks. And you can see the outcomes shown in the table there, and the actual cost benefits is quite considerable for an outlay of 4.5 million from the Department for Work and Pensions. The DWPO estimates was a 10.5 million return on that investment. So clearly the case for return on investment in careers advice and guidance, the signs and the indicators are positive, and I think that's something we should bear in mind when we are looking at the issue about how do you fund, how do you cost programs going forward. So coming now to the white paper that Tristram mentioned earlier, this was recently released this year. It puts a higher premium on technical and vocational learning, and it set out a strategy to increase its value to individuals and to the economy. And I'd agree with Tristram that whilst it is really, it's not said a lot new, it's tended to codify a lot of different initiatives and thoughts that governments over recent years have had, it does at least make a very strong statement about the importance of technical vocational learning for young people. From a careers perspective, I'd argue that if we wish to realise these ambitions, we would need to start much earlier than age 16 and build a more radical technical and vocational curriculum from at least Key Stage 3. You know, I'm sure many of you have been in the education world for quite some time, and you'll have seen come and go similar initiatives like CPVE, CVI, GMVQs, etc. None of them ever sustained, but all made a case for higher profile for technical and vocational learning. But we remain, however, with that same old conundrum of the parity of esteem between the relative value of academic education qualifications compared with vocational. And I think it's true to say that as a society, we tend to see the goal of higher education and university access as the measure of worth of many years of education, more so than we do the acquisition of technical and vocational skills. And that really is something that needs to change. The question is, we can't really afford much longer to ignore that. And I think the white paper is trying to bring this into light now and to do something about it. But we do know that, you know, with the onset of artificial intelligence and global competition, you know, the kind of graduate skills that we have in the UK are under greater pressures in terms of their tradability going forward. Professional careers advice and guidance can be instrumental in broadening the scope of choices made by young people, and I think therefore the work of careers coordinators in schools, careers advisors in schools is very important in informing and building a greater understanding of the value of technical and vocational pathways to achievements, and also with parents as well. The traditional, you know, targets for numbers of young people entering higher education, where, you know, 50% of young people 18 to 30 rather should go into higher education, were probably well meant at the time, but I'm not sure they are well directed in terms of the way economies and labour markets are operating now and will be in the future. The fact of the matter is that you know, we're seeing more graduates now in non-graduate professions than we have before. In 2017, the number of recent graduates working in non-graduate jobs had risen from 37% in 2017, to 49% in 2019. And the percentage of non-recent graduates working in non-graduate jobs stood at 35%. So clearly, whilst we may produce more graduates, they're not necessarily accessing higher level skilled occupations and higher levels of remuneration as a consequence. So clearly, the emphasis on skills we need going forward is well placed and very timely. If we can move on to the next slide, which is skills. So we'll move on to the plan for jobs, if we could, please. Okay, I'll carry on to that. I did say that earlier on when I showed the picture of the Chancellor that I would come back to his statements and what's happened to the £32 million that's been invested in £32 million invested in careers advice. Well, the plan for jobs set out a range of measures to address the huge increase in unemployment that's occurred due to the pandemic. And it's fair to say that the plan for jobs is urgently needed, but I would caution that we run the risk of placing a focus of moving people quickly into opportunities at the expense of fit. If the focus is lost on what individuals want or are best suited to, we could create a revolving door of people churning in and out of ill-suited opportunities. And this is likely to have a less beneficial return to the billions being poured into the recovery by governments. The Chancellor mentioned yesterday in his budget statement that unemployment would probably peak around 6.5%. On that slide I showed it would be greater than 7%, which was the view at the time. So clearly the government's a little bit more buoyed about the direction we're taking. But I think it's fair to say that until businesses in the sectors most affected fully reopen and the furlough scheme ends, which will be end of September, we'll not really know the true impacts that the pandemic has had on jobs and levels of unemployment. Many of the jobs that young people are leaving are unlikely to be there in the numbers when the recovery starts. It's fair to say by looking at those sectors, people therefore will need to broaden their outlook, probably will need to retrain, and will need to commit to new types and new patterns of work. And this is where careers advice and guidance really comes into its own. The Kickstart and Traineeship Programme, again, that's there for those people recently made unemployed. So where is this £32 million for the National Career Service going to make a difference? Well, I think it's fair to say at this stage that it's unlikely that £32 million will be spent in the time frame. And this is due largely to the fact that gaining access to unemployed people, people recently made redundant by the National Career Service, is impacted by their inability to provide face-to-face interventions. A lot of their centres have closed during the pandemic. But it's also true to say that the priority groups that the government set for the National Career Service exclude the most recently unemployed and young people aged 16 to 18 from accessing the service. And I think this really is an issue. It's not going to serve us well in terms of the ability of the National Career Service to make the impact it ought to make. And I think we potentially risk finding that we have a lot of that extra £32 million, as I say, unspent, and a lot of the potential benefits of offering careers advice to people being missed. There's been obviously a much bigger investment in job centre work coaches, and their role is to move people into the initiatives and schemes that have been set up in the plan for jobs. Unfortunately, the plan doesn't integrate careers advice into the pathway for individuals. And it's true to say that the evidence of work coaches referring people for careers advice from the National Career Service before these people are being ushered into or helps into opportunities is patchy at best. And we really need to be looking at government joining up its agendas between its relevant departments. If we don't, I think we're likely to witness the level of churn, the revolving door that's been typical of many previous temporary initiatives, which are expensive but don't always leave a sustainable benefit for individuals or for the economy. So that lack of coherent planning between the Department for Work and Pension and the Department for Education is in danger of proving inefficient and very costly. And one of the issues I would recommend to government, and have recommended to government on behalf of Careers England, is that needs to be looked at very carefully. That's one side of this equation. I want to just feature now another side to this equation, because it's not being talked about a lot, and it really is, or should be, a major concern for everybody, really. And that is that we run the risk of overlooking those young people who were NEETs, starting education, employment and training, before COVID hits. There's a real danger that these young people will be left further behind as the emphasis and the focus of attention is on those recently made redundant, recently made unemployed. And you can see on the slide there that at least since the cessation of connections at a national level, studies have shown we've lost track of more than 150,000 young people aged 16 to 18, and it's believed that at least 50,000 of these are likely to be NEETs. And within that group of young people, there's a range of needs. We've got people with special education needs and disabilities, 52% of whom were in employment pre-pandemic, compared with 82% of non-disabled people. 30% of children already living in poverty before the pandemic hit, and many in households furthest from the labour markets. People from black and ethnic minority backgrounds who are disproportionately represented in the unemployment numbers pre-COVID, and I'm sure that is likely to be the case post-pandemic as well. So despite growing employment levels pre-COVID, we have as many 18-year-olds NEETs just before the pandemic hit as that we had 15 years previously. So as many 18-year-olds NEETs in January 2020 as we had 15 years before. So clearly there's a generation of young people here who are in danger of being overlooked, being pushed to the back of the queue, and their lives clearly are as important as those who've recently, unfortunately, lost their work. And to give you some scale for that, there's 1 in 8 young people NEETs at the age of 18, and that equates to 25 young people every year from the average secondary school in England. So turning their lives around will need more intensive forms of support beyond access to careers advice sessions, but intensive support from careers advisors and others who can help to coach, enable, support these young people who traditionally find it very difficult to engage and to sustain positive work experiences. So coming to the last slide, which has been shown there, the considerations I would be urging us to look at as a nation is that clearly we need a better cross-government strategy to tackle youth unemployment for young people aged 16 to 25. That means important departments of state, as I mentioned before, like DWP and DFE and others, working together in tandem rather than operating in silos. That we need an accountable body to oversee an investment in lifelong careers, information, advice and guidance services. At the moment, the system is fragmented. We had an event yesterday where we had politicians from all parties speaking on this issue, and some of those politicians were making great emphasis about the way careers services, careers information advice and guidance services are fragmented and patchwork in the country, and that needs addressing. And I think if we had an accountable body who could look at the landscape in total, look at the investment that's being made, and being able to measure and test what the return of that investment is, I think we would have a better, more coherent strategy to deal with the needs of individuals, the needs of the economy, not just post-pandemic, but in general. And I think a funding-backed guarantee of access for all young people to independent and professional careers advice and guidance from school to work is essential. We don't have that at the moment. With schools, those schools that buy in services currently do it from the margins of their budgets, and those budgets can vary. Some schools are unable to do it at all, and I think we really need a guarantee for all young people to have access to impartial professional careers advice as they're leaving school, as they're finding their way into adult and working life. And the point there about it also being accessible by parents and guardians is true. It's always been the case, and it still is the case in recent studies, that the biggest influence on career decisions made by young people is still their parents and guardians. Now, those of us who are parents might think, well, they never listen to me about anything else. They clearly do about careers. And therefore, we need to enable and equip parents to understand what's available and what the best ways they can support their children in terms of the decisions they take on leaving school. And we're seeing many of our members who are now working, providing virtual careers advice and guidance to young people in schools and young people in the labour markets because of the pandemic. We're seeing a huge increase in the numbers of parents who've wanted to access that service and talk to professional careers advisors about what the options are for their young people. Clearly, these are parents who are naturally worried about the impact the pandemic's had on their children's education, on their likely exam results, and the choices that they'll be having to make in a very different labour market going forward. I think finally, really, I think we need to empower local areas to reach and engage those young people who are needs or hidden needs. There are many, as I say, up to 150,000 young people there who we think are really unknown to our system in terms of the Office for National Statistics, the DFE's own customer information system. 150,000 missing from that. We need to engage them because they will be those that will need the greatest level of help going forward. So I'll finish at that point. I'm hoping that everybody could hear that and that it came across as cogently as it could in the circumstances.
Great, thank you very much. That worked very well. Thank you. You need somebody who needs to put themselves on mute. I guess it's Joe, probably. Great, super. Okay, well, thank you for that. And I think that's raised a lot of really important policy issues about how career guidance should be organised in England. I'm going to go back to the questions because we've got a huge amount of questions. I've been trying to kind of keep track of them as they've been coming in. I'll probably come back to Kieran in a bit, but I think actually the first question really follows on from where Kieran finished up there, which is about tracking and about the challenges of tracking students, particularly when they're neat. Now, in recent years, some of the responsibility for that tracking has been placed onto schools, and the Gatsby benchmarks actually require that schools should be tracking pupils for 3 years. And I remember this, this has come up a number of times. A lot of schools find that very difficult. It's out of kilter with what the local authorities are doing. What does that really mean? Should it change? So, Nicola, do you have any sense about how schools are handling that tracking requirement effectively?
Yeah, sure. So this is actually really fantastic timing because I think Kelly, my colleague, will have posted the link into the chat, but our very last edition of our Careers Leader Digital Communications, which went out to schools and colleges last Thursday, was a whole feature on destinations tracking, and it shared a range of different examples about how schools are actually approaching that destination tracking from their perspective. But in terms of CEC, we're also looking at destinations tracking on a much bigger level at the moment, and we've recently just completed a research project with a company called York Consulting, who have really explored the challenges around destinations tracking in more depth. And our current head of research, Emily Tanner, met with the DFE last week to really share some of the challenges and concerns that we know that are very real for schools and colleges whilst undertaking this piece of work. And so some really positive news is that the DFE were very interested in that piece of work, and as an interim they have committed to going away and quickly updating the Good Destinations Guide for schools to use, which is the formal guidance documentation that comes out from the DfE. So that will be imminently updated to support schools and colleges. And we will make sure that that's shared with careers leaders when that's updated. But for the time being, there are two places where I would go and look for some really good examples. First is our Careers in Context guide, which we put together in September to support schools with approaching their careers offers in the context of the pandemic. And the second is head in the direction of our careers leader communication from last week. If you can't find that, then if you go to the resource directory, there's a place to sign up to our communications link, or email our education inbox and we will send it directly to you. But there's all kinds of kind of on the ground examples and activities in there.
Super, thank you very much. There's actually a lot of activity in here, and I mean, we've got a lot of links in the chat actually to some of your resources, but also I think it sounds like there's a bit of a watch this space, because we might have a bit of a clearer sort of alignment of all the different regulations and so on in this area. Yeah. I don't know, I'll throw this open to Kieran, but Nicola, if you want to come in as well. One of the questions that Penny Conlin has just asked is about how we should be responding to well, young people, but also potentially older people as well, who are thinking of going into some of the sectors that have been most challenged during the pandemic. So, you know, particularly things like the arts and culture, music, you know, these sorts of areas which have been very difficult in the pandemic. How should careers professionals be trying to advise young people who are thinking in that direction when the prospects look so grim at the moment?
Yeah, it's tricky issue, I guess. I think what I would say on that is, I mean, just taking those examples you gave there, the arts, music industry, culture, etc. I think it'd be hard to believe that those sectors, even though they've been extremely badly affected, are not likely to regenerate and revive. God forbid life if we had no music, no art, and no culture. So I think, you know, what we might be saying to people wishing to go into those careers, which are quite niche areas, and people tend to gravitate towards those because they have particular interests and skill sets, you know, they're specific to music, for example, specific to art or for performing arts, etc. And those young people generally, I guess, as long as they're realistic, that's the right area for them to go into, irrespective of the pandemic, then I think the kind of advice needs to then support them, enable them to understand that those respective sectors of industry are going to have to be rebuilt. There'll be some time delay in that, and most of those, you know, where there's a route in through an education route, maybe a degree, etc., you'd like to think that if this is a young person now at the age of 18 considering going on to university, or a young person at the age of 16 considering maybe college and university, or sixth form and university, that the time between them doing that and them then graduating or becoming available to the labour market, that those industries will be in better shape. But I think the kind of support needs to not scare them from taking those decisions, but making them realistic that the opportunities that they seek may not be there now, but they may be there in the future. They may be there in a different form in the future as well. So it's a difficult one to call, but and I focused in on those. They're very niche. You could ask the question, well, what about people maybe, for example, in hospitality, in hotels and catering and pubs? I guess, you know, that's a bit more tricky with that. I mean, you know, hotels will recover from this, pubs will recover from this, but I think inevitably a number probably will go under. You know, we may see airlines going under, we may see travel companies going under. So the supply of work may be reduced and suppressed for some time to come, and therefore, you know, it might be worth advising young people to think, well, you know, are there other areas, skill areas or interest areas you have that you might want to consider as alternatives to that, and really broaden their horizons to have them to look and see, you know, what particular skills are involved in that, what draws you to that, and look at other alternatives where there might be growing employment in the future.
I think that's, I mean, it's really the most tricky thing of our world, isn't it? Is you're trying to balance aspiration and opportunity all the time. It's really tricky, and it's one of the things, particularly in a moment like now, and who can really say? I mean, I'm a great believer in labour market information. I think it's absolutely critical. It's the heart of the knowledge base of our profession, but it also has got some limits, and nobody knows how some things are going to go in the future. I did a bit of research with Robin Mellors-Bourne at Crack, and we looked at graduates of dance and drama degrees, and you know what we found out was, if you want to earn as much as possible, then doing a dance and drama degree probably isn't your best bet. If, however, you want to have a really, you know, fulfilled life where you feel that you're using your education every day and you love what you do and so on, then actually there was a lot of evidence that those dance and drama graduates actually got a huge amount out of their studies. So I think, you know, some of this comes down to helping young people to think through the options, helping them to think through what they want, and to deal with some of those challenges. I'll hand over to Nicola now, but I'm just going to throw another question into you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Which is, I mean, if you come back on this one, but also the other thing is people would like some advice on how to engage their head teachers in this area, because the big challenge that many careers professionals have is, how do you get, you know, enough resources? How do you get the head teachers to buy into it? And what can you advise them on that, as well as, you know, anything more you've got to say on this issue?
Okay, perfect. So just on the content, on the where we were at before with the difficult sectors, I think Kieran absolutely hit the nail on the head when he was talking about looking at what other growth sectors are in place. And I think it's important for young people, particularly young people who are in schools, who are really at the stage of just exploring opportunity and being very curious about their future options. It's sometimes worth focusing them in on what skills are needed for the particular sector that they are interested in, and how do they develop transferable skills that could then be implemented across a range of different sectors as different sectors start to recover and emerge. But I'll leave that one there because the answers have been so comprehensive already. This is my favourite question about how to engage head teachers. It's one that I deliver induction sessions for enterprise coordinators all over the country, and this is the most asked question for me as a head teacher. And I think the trick to engaging a head teacher is to talk their language, and to do so in such a way that you create a careers vision within your schools and college that's impossible for them to ignore. And I've never met a head teacher, or a teacher actually, frankly, but I've never met a head teacher in my life that would argue that preparing young people for their futures is not the central and fundamental part of their job. We all go about it in different ways, and we all have things that really compel us to lead our schools in certain ways, but we all have an interest in preparing young people for their next step beyond school. Every school in the country will have a vision, and it will have a vision or a mission statement plastered all over their website somewhere. It'll be on the prospectus, it'll be on the banners and the signs outside the school gate. And I bet that in the vast majority of situations, you could take that sentence or those few words and link them to careers. And if you can then develop your own careers vision for your school as the careers leader and hook it into the whole school vision, you already have the start of a dialogue that a head teacher can't ignore. And you need to take them down the journey of your vision by linking the whole school careers provision to the school development plan and to priorities. Now, some careers leaders say to me, well, I don't have the school development plan. How do I even get that? You know, it's kind of locked in the SLT room, and we don't really see it at that level. The key to that is holding really regular and effective meetings with your SLT line manager. If you don't have that chain of communication with an SLT link person in your school, then there's something fundamentally wrong, because not at the very least, they should be interested in your particular performance as an individual and as a member of their school workforce. But apart from that, if you have really regular, impactful meetings with your SLT line manager, you have an automatic route through to your head teacher. But the critical feature of those meetings and how you have dialogue with your head teacher is showing impact. And you can show impact through various different ways. You can think about career surveys within school on a regular basis to show growth in impact. You can consider your benchmark progress. You can think about youth voice. But one of the really most important pieces of advice I can give you is make careers high profile in your school. Now, you can do this by stealth if necessary. It doesn't have to be, you know, top of the head teacher's priority list before you can start infiltrating the whole school environment without too much trouble. So you make sure that your displays are the best displays in the school, that they're linked to curriculum areas, that you've got really high quality alumni stories, because head teachers love hearing about successes of their former students. And then one of the best and most impactful things you can do in terms of getting your head teacher's attention is making sure that your careers activity that's linked to industry and linked to encounters and linked to opportunities starts to feature in the local community. So is it in the local press? Is it, you know, are people in the community talking about what's happening in your school? And all of a sudden, your head teacher's ears will prick up and they will start to take a real interest in careers. Now, that won't necessarily immediately translate into resources, pounds and pence, but I can tell you that anybody came into my office and said, well, I don't have enough time or money to do careers. Well, that's not going to cut the mustard. What I need is a really well thought out plan of how me investing in your careers program is going to make a difference for every young person in that school. Now, you start small and start with the people that are going to come with you on your journey. So develop your curriculum-based careers champions. Think hard about how you're going to start developing a whole school careers community. Chip off your friends first, and you will start to gather steam across your school, and your head teacher will start listening to that development overall. But what's one really, really last important thing, use careers to influence and support your parents. Careers events often are some of the most positive events that happen in a whole school calendar. So they're far more positive and often better attended than parents' evenings in really difficult schools. So use those statistics and impact and opportunities to take careers out there. Make sure careers has a presence at every single parents' evening in the school. Make sure the local college is there. Make sure the apprenticeship providers are there, and take it to a place that it can't be ignored. And then your head teacher will sit up on this.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask one more question. So I'd asked both of you to be very brief on this, but it kind of follows on from both of you talked about the white paper. White paper is primarily about further education, but all the stuff about careers in it is really about supporting young people to consider further education. And it doesn't say anything about what careers in, you know, what career guidance, what careers education within further education should look like. And there may be people here today who have come from a college. So what advice would you give to people who are responsible for delivering careers within a college? Kieran, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, most colleges will have a careers setup. They'll have a team, usually a student advisory service available to all of their students, and they'll deal with all aspects of the students' welfare, from financial concerns to personal, social, health concerns as they affect their education, but also they'll take on issues related to learning pathways and careers. It's not always the case that careers advisors working in FE colleges are professionally qualified careers advisors, and some colleges may buy in services from organisations that employ professional careers advisors, or from sole trader professional careers advisors themselves. I find that a lot of the guidance that takes place in colleges tends to be around the pressure moments are around enrolment and around where students are struggling with a course and are likely to drop out. The endpoint careers advice and guidance, it tends to vary from probably faculty to faculty, depending on whether it's a vocational faculty or an academic faculty. And schools, they have been covered by the career strategy. They've been able to access careers enterprise company support as well latterly, and I think there's still a big job to do as a nation to ensure that the guarantee of access to independent professional advice that we promote for young people in schools should be equally available to young people and adults in further education colleges.
Thank you. I'm losing control of time, so I'm just going to want to give Nicola the last word. Just a kind of 1 or 2 sentences on what you would advise people responsible for careers in colleges.
Yeah. OK, I'll be really quick. So everything I've said today is as relevant for a college as it is for a school. All of our resources have got college related sections to them as well. The colleges that we see that are really effective in this space all have a mantra of careers, not courses, as the culture they develop. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, linked on my slide is an invitation to join something called Connect. Now that's an e-community for college careers professionals, and all the content that comes out in that community is developed and written and provided by college careers professionals, and they share it for the benefit of developing that activity within their sector. So head there.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Sorry to kind of have to wrap this up, and we've covered such wide ground. I mean, can't be many other fields where you cover, how schools work, you cover, what's education for, you cover politics, policy, the economy and everything. But we've given it all a bit of a go today. Thank you so much to Careers Live for having us on. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. I'm going to hand over to Caroline to finish us off. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tristram, Nicola and Kieran. That was really interesting, quite a wide range of topics covered there. I was jotting down a few things as we were going along, starting off with Tristram in talking about the long ascent and things getting worse before they get better. Nicola talking very much about fantastic resources now that are available to schools through Careers and Enterprise Company, and then Kieran taking it a little bit further into adulthood and talking about some of the reasons that there are pressures in the economy that impact on people from the off, really, and that importance of LMI in terms of making good careers choices and how to help people and make sure that they all have a good future. So I think future, I put something in the chat. Future is the word that came to me very much as I was listening to people. In terms of resources, the Opportunity Centre, Aspire iGen, many of you will know, have been the UK's Euro Guidance Centre for many years. They've got an international research arm working on Erasmus Plus contracts. They have there are on the Opportunity Centre website lots of free resources too. I did mention, I don't know if anybody can see this, I don't even know where my camera is, so something called, it can't see it actually, but the Future Time Traveller project. If you look on, there's quite a bit about transforming career guidance on future skills, jobs and career prospects of Generation Z through a game-based virtual reality programme called Future. So there are lots and lots and lots of free resources out there. The thing that kept coming to the back of my mind when I was listening to people is, if employers determine the futures of young people through through input in curriculum, etc., is there a real danger that we're going to lose subjects and we're going to lose information, and what will happen to Greek and things like that? You know, I mean, knowledge for knowledge's sake and developing young people. So I think independent advice and guidance, we have to hold on to that somewhere, or I think we'll lose something. Lots of interesting perspectives. Just to draw your attention finally to Careers Live Extra, there are 6 shorts coming up throughout March that you can join. The links on the invitation that you had to Careers Live, and they cover everything from gender equality, LMI, to embedding careers learning in your school and post-16 options, etc. So please take a look at those and join if you can. In the meantime, I hope that you found the discussion interesting. On your behalf, I'd like to thank all of our presenters, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.